Sometimes the moment a man realizes he actually cares about you is the exact moment he begins to disappear. Not because the feeling wasn't real, but because suddenly it was. And for some people, real feelings don't just bring closeness, they bring fear. You might remember the moment it happened, when something between you suddenly felt different, closer, warmer, more honest than before. Maybe it was during a late conversation when everything felt unusually open. The kind of conversation where people stop pretending and start saying things they didn't plan to say. Maybe he looked at you in a way that felt softer than usual. Not just attracted, not just curious, but vulnerable. Like he had crossed some invisible line inside himself. And then he said it. "I think I'm a little scared." At first, the sentence sounded honest, almost sweet. You didn't hear danger in those words. You heard trust, because most people don't admit fear unless they feel safe enough to show it. So you reassured him. You told him it was okay. You told him there was no pressure. You told him you weren't expecting anything from him, and you meant it. You weren't trying to force a relationship. You weren't trying to push things forward. You were simply enjoying what was naturally growing between you. And for a moment, it seemed like that was exactly what he needed. He relaxed. He smiled again. The tension in his shoulders softened, like something inside him had just been understood. The rest of the evening felt calm, peaceful even, like something fragile had been spoken out loud and somehow survived. But then, slowly, something began to change. Not dramatically, not overnight, just small things. His messages became slightly shorter. Replies that once came quickly started taking longer. Phone calls that used to happen naturally started becoming less frequent. Nothing disappeared completely, but something had shifted. At first, you didn't think much about it. People get busy, work gets stressful, life happens. You told yourself there were plenty of normal explanations. But somewhere inside you, a quiet feeling noticed the difference. The warmth was still there, but it felt more distant now, like he had taken half a step back without explaining why. Then, one day, you remembered the sentence he said. "I'm scared." When you first heard it, it sounded like vulnerability. But now it started to feel like something else, almost like a signal. Because sometimes when someone says they're scared, what they're really saying is, "This is starting to matter to me." And for people who struggle with emotional closeness, that realization can feel overwhelming. Not romantic, not exciting, but risky. Because caring about someone creates something new. Risk of losing them. Risk of needing them. Risk of being hurt if the connection disappears. And some people have spent years learning how to avoid exactly that kind of risk. Not consciously, just through experience. If someone has been hurt before, or learned early in life that emotional closeness leads to disappointment, they often develop quiet ways of protecting themselves. They stay warm, they stay kind, they stay emotionally present, but they also keep a small layer of distance, just enough to stay safe. Most of the time, this balance works perfectly. Connections stay enjoyable. Nothing becomes too intense. Nothing becomes too complicated. But sometimes someone enters their life who slowly changes that balance, without trying, without pushing, just by being genuine, just by creating a space where honesty feels natural, where emotions begin to surface without effort. And suddenly the connection becomes deeper than expected. That's when something inside certain people quietly activates. Not excitement, protection, because emotional depth means vulnerability, and vulnerability means uncertainty. So the instinct becomes simple. Create space. Not because the other person did something wrong, but because the feelings themselves suddenly feel stronger than expected. From the outside, this behavior can feel incredibly confusing, because the same person who begins to pull away is often the one who created the closeness in the first place, the one who shared personal thoughts, the one who opened up emotionally, the one who made the connection feel real, which makes the distance feel almost contradictory. But internally, it doesn't always feel like contradiction. It feels like self-protection. When emotions grow deeper than someone is used to handling, distance can feel like the only way to slow things down, to breathe, to think, to regain control over feelings that suddenly became stronger than expected. And sometimes that distance slowly becomes silence, not a dramatic disappearance, no argument, no goodbye, just less presence, less conversation, less closeness, until the connection that once felt warm begins to feel uncertain. And when that happens, the person left behind often starts asking painful questions. Did I imagine the connection? Did I misunderstand the moment? Did the way he looked at me mean less than I thought? Was the closeness only temporary? These questions can become loud when someone pulls away without explanation. But sometimes the truth is quieter than the questions. Because for many people, pulling away isn't about losing feelings. It's about being overwhelmed by them. Some people can handle attraction easily. They can handle chemistry. They can handle excitement. But the moment emotions become real, the moment someone feels truly seen, something inside them quietly presses the brakes. Not because they want to hurt anyone, but because vulnerability feels unfamiliar. And unfamiliar emotions can feel threatening. So distance becomes the safest response. From his side, it might not even feel like disappearing. It might feel like breathing room. Time to calm down. Time to understand feelings he didn't expect to have. But from your side, it feels different. Because you experienced the moment he opened up. You heard the honesty in his voice. You saw the vulnerability in his eyes. And then you watched the distance appear afterward. Which leaves a quiet question many people eventually ask themselves. Was the feeling ever real? Or did it only become real right before he disappeared? Sometimes the uncomfortable truth is that both can be true at the same time. He might have felt something genuine, and that might have been exactly what scared him. Not because you did anything wrong, not because the connection wasn't meaningful, but because the moment he realized the connection mattered, his instinct was to step back before it became something he didn't know how to handle. Sometimes people don't leave because the connection was weak. Sometimes they leave because it was strong enough to change something inside them. And that kind of change can feel terrifying if someone isn't used to letting people close. So they step back. Not always forever, not always intentionally, but enough to create distance between themselves and the emotions that suddenly felt too real. And for the person on the other side, it can feel like a quiet disappearance, a connection that once felt alive, slowly fading into silence.